We are the Thunderbolts!
Can't call ourselves that.
God, thank you.
With the Thunderbolts release, we finally know what the asterisk is for. We also know how this is going to be connecting to Avengers Doomsday, and the post-credit scene definitely sets it up in a very major way. So in this video, we're going to be breaking down the Thunderbolts, but first, we're going to be breaking down that ending and the post-credit scene, because those are the most two important things that came out of this film, other than dealing with your mental health and how to deal with it properly. Because honestly, at the end of the day, this was the mental health Avengers and how to properly deal with trauma, which I think they did fantastic in this movie. We're also going to be breaking down the Easter eggs and references, of course, while also just going over who the Thunderbolts are in the comics and also who the Sentry is. So there's a lot to cover, and we're going to go straight into it with that ending, with how the Thunderbolts, the way they saved the day was by doing it all with love. Well, and caring about their fellow member, because Bob was pretty much a Thunderbolts member from the very beginning after he joined the team when they saved him in the vault. Now, the thing is, with this ending, I know people are probably going to complain because it's like the talk no jutsu. They're just talking it out. But the thing is, at the end of the day, there was no way these characters were going to ever beat the Sentry. Like they made the joke in this film that they just shoot and punch things. They aren't characters that could go against a literal god-level character. Because the Sentry has super strength, invulnerability, super speed, and all the basic things you get with the superhuman abilities, but they could also fly, and honestly, just pretty much unstoppable for these characters, especially with the Void being so OP, and just being able to send them into this shadow realm. So having Bob be the one to take them down in the end made a lot of sense, but Bob wasn't able to do it alone. The whole idea of this film was to make it so that you don't face your past trauma alone. You have it with other people to line up the load, and to be able to talk about it and share that with the other people around you. It makes it so that you never feel alone. That's the end of the day thing, that you don't feel alone. I'll probably say that a bunch in this video too, because that's how they really nailed down that no matter what you're going through, no matter what you're dealing with, you're never alone. You don't have to do things alone. And I love how they kind of portrayed that in this movie. But after they were able to get Bob to realize he wasn't alone, overcome the Void with the help of the Thunderbolts, they end up back in New York City with everyone now being released from this shadow realm that he's created. And having Val there, where they can finally take her down. She's the one that set up everything in this film. She was really the bad guy, trying to put each one of them against one another to cover up her own little secrets that she was doing behind the scenes with the Sentry project. Now, when they go together, they go past this tarp that leads into a press conference with her using them to create the new Avengers. This movie, the asterisk, was all to set up the new Avengers. And in the end of the day, are they really the Avengers? Because they make the joke at the end too, in the credits, how these aren't really the Avengers, they're the fake ones. Do people really believe them? All setting up the fact that this is now a government-sanctioned Avengers team that is working with the government. But they also set it up in the way that Val is now owned by Yelena and them, because Yelena knows all her dirty secrets and can out her at any point that gets her sent to jail. So now Val can make these characters look like heroes while funding their deeds. So Val is now the new funder of these new Avengers, and she's going to be running the team with really no say, because the other characters are going to have all the say, as she's literally just footing the bill. And the thing is too, the Sentry in the comics was part of the new Avengers at first, and it all just leads back into why he's part of this movie, and why the Thunderbolts were going against him, how these characters never really felt like the Thunderbolts in the comics. And after all this, we do get a post-credit scene that ties heavily into these characters, with having a 14th month time jump that leads us straight in to Avengers Doomsday, literally taking place during the events of Avengers Doomsday, as they reference that Sam Wilson has created his own Avengers team. He also copyrighted the name, so that this new Avengers team can no longer use that name and have to come up with a new one, because there's already an Avengers that it's actually recognized by everyone else. And with Sam's new Avengers, I'm sure we're going to be seeing the Hulk, Captain Marvel, and other characters that are supposed to be in Avengers Doomsday, like Thor. But the way they're talking about this with the space issue most likely means that either Doctor Doom comes through a space rift and is in outer space, or there's going to be an incursion that they're dealing with. Because then they have a dimensional rift that opens up, and they have a warning about it that sets up the fact that the Fantastic Four have now come through, showing the Fantastic Four spaceship, which means that in Fantastic Four, they're going to lose to Galactus. They're probably going to get sucked through an incursion that brings them into the main MCU timeline while they're trying to escape the destruction that Galactus is causing, or Reed Richards has created a portal that has sent them into this new MCU as they go in to look for help or try to figure out what's going on with the multiverses and everything else like that. Because in the comics, during Hickman's run of the Avengers, which leads into the Secret Wars in comics, it also has Reed having an interdimensional portal that they can go to other multiverses. So one of those two things could be happening, but this is just a big setup for what's to come for the next Avengers film for Fantastic Four, which comes out in July, and just setting up how all the characters are going to meet, which most likely means as well that the new Avengers are going to end up meeting up with the Fantastic Four after they see him come and land on Earth, and then they're going to go end up leading into the other Avengers team with Sam and all of them, and having them all group up together to team up and go against Doctor Doom and everything else that has to go with whatever plan he's running. Now, one of the other things here is each one of these characters has a new suit. They're part of the Avengers. Honestly, their suits all look great, except Bob has not been the Sentry. Even in these 14 months, he's just been Bob, which means he's scared of the Void coming out, which is a big thing from the comics. Whenever he's a Sentry, there's always that risk. But I feel like when we get to Avengers Doomsday, we're going to be having him suit up as the Sentry because they're going to need a powerhouse to help them out. They're going to be with him so that no matter what, he won't have the Void come out. And with having his friends and him not doing it alone, they'll also tie into that as well. But honestly, really excited for the next Avengers film with this post-credit scene because I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting something else to set up Doctor Doom or something along those lines, maybe an incursion, but I was not expecting a 14 months time jump and having them see the Fantastic Four spaceship come through space and coming into Earth. So really cool that they set this up. And I'm also just surprised that Bucky is not with Sam because they're friends. I'm surprised that there was any kind of conflict here, but I'm assuming it all has to do with Val, where Val won't let them work with other Avengers. Bucky has to be on that team because he was announced on that team, but he can't team up with Sam, who's creating his own one. And I'm hoping that we see some kind of conflict here in Avengers Doomsday to get reference to this post-credit scene, and also wonder why they aren't working together right away and why these fake Avengers were left on Earth. But they set up all this to kind of tease what's to come, and they also had a fun moment of Red Guardian having a tracksuit that has sponsors on it, and also having it say the New Avengers with a Z so that he won't get caught by copyright. So they all set all this up just to kind of lead into the two conflicting teams, and also just makes me question what's going to happen after Avengers Doomsday. Are they still going to be the New Avengers, or is it going to all mold into one team? But let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. But now let's jump into that Easter egg breakdown, where we're going to be going over the entire film, talking about those references, and just breaking down the film in general. Also reviewing it a bit, because this movie did a fantastic job. Like I said before, I thought they did a really good job with dealing with mental health, because each one of these characters had their own past trauma to overcome. Ghost had her trauma of having her parents die, being used by S.H.I.E.L.D., and then going after Ant-Man in order to try to find a way to make sure that her body wasn't slowly being destroyed because of her quantum mutation powers that make her intangible. We also had Yelena dealing with her past trauma here, where she feels empty. She doesn't feel like there's anything inside her. She has no higher purpose. Ever since she lost Natasha, she never really got that chance to redeem herself, and she's just been putting herself into work and working for Val this entire time, which we saw in Hawkeye and at the end of Black Widow's post-credit scene, where Yelena was working for Val, and she's been doing that ever since. We have our Guardian here being that support to push Yelena forward, also being that kind of comedic relief for the movie, because he has so many fun moments, and he's like that father that embarrasses his daughter, which I thought was a lot of fun during the film. Overall, at the end of the day, this story is Yelena becoming a hero and following in her sister's legacy. Now, Bucky here, we've seen him go through a lot of stuff over the years. They didn't really focus too much about him, other than him being the leading factor to show these guys that, you might have past regrets, past traumas, but the only way to move past them is to face it. He was that leading force to show that, even no matter where you come from, you can always redeem yourself and be better. Then you have John Walker trying to face his traumas and past, where he had the Captain America mantle ripped away from him after he killed the person with the Captain America shield during Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then he never lived that down. Instead, he's just been working for Val, like we saw at the end of that show as well. He even lost his wife and kid after that because his wife left him because he was so depressed after everything that happened there, and he could never really recover from it. Now, with this New Avengers, he can now eventually become a hero once again and get his wife back and show that he's changed. And overall, they just did a fantastic job upping these characters and giving them more depth that we haven't seen yet, because we've only seen most of them other than Bucky in a couple projects. Plus, on top of it, this movie had some fantastic choreography when it came to the fights, and all the actors also were bouncing off one another and had great chemistry, which I thought they did a fantastic job when it came to that. Now, also, Sentry was a great addition with Bob. He was a lot of fun, and he seems like a really nice character that I'm looking forward to learning more about as we go more into the MCU, and he has to take on that hero role and get to see his battle between the Sentry and the Void even more, because he stopped being the Sentry because he was scared of the Void, and I feel like he's gonna have to face that fear to help the heroes out in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. So at the end of the day, just an absolutely amazing film. And it all starts off with some pretty cool Easter eggs, as the new Marvel logo is just showing comic panels, but it shows the Sentry and the Void during it, and having the Marvel logo go black to represent the Void and teasing the big bad of the movie. Starting with Yelena going to take down the Ox lab that has been experimenting on people and is what eventually created the Sentry, because we even see in this moment when she's up there, the black shadows on the wall from Bob turning into the Void and killing those people. And I like this moment because there was a lot of fun just seeing Yelena joke around and also just see her save this guinea pig when she leaves the lab. Just showing what kind of person she is. It also leads into her wanting to leave and quit. She doesn't want to do this work anymore. She wants to change in her life, which is the whole point of the film. The film is to push Elena into being a hero and to follow in her sister's footsteps. This is also where we find out that Val is actually being impeached for everything she's been doing with the Sentry project, as well as doing these inhumane experiments. That's why Bucky's at this hearing, and that's where we get to see him as a congressman once again, which we first learned about him being a congressman during Captain America Brave New World, when he has that scene with Sam after Joaquin Torres gets injured while they're fighting against Japan. Val talks about how they were trying to create these superhuman beings because the United States need a shield. They need heroes to rely on because the Avengers are no longer around. Time back to Brave New World, where they talk about how the Avengers are no longer around, and also leading into Sam making a new Avengers team. And I feel like that shield reference is also just a reference to shield in general, ever since they were taken down during the Winter Soldier. They also reference more events from Brave New World by referencing how the president turned into a Red Hulk monster and destroyed the White House. So just a nice reference to the movie that came before this, because Brave New World and this movie were pretty much sequels to one another leading into the events. So I really like how they had that there. And we also had Yelena going to see Red Guardian because she talks to him about wanting to quit. And these gave us some really cool moments between father and daughter, and how she feels empty, but having her father be there to kind of motivate her to be this hero, saying she has to follow in her sister's footsteps, and that the call of being a hero is something Natasha understood. And in his house as well, we get some cool little Easter eggs with a bunch of Red Guardian posters all over the place, showing how he's obsessed of wanting to be this hero once again. You know, he's tired of just being himself. He wants to be the Red Guardian, and he's even watching an old video of him being Red Guardian being showed to Russians. So I like how they kind of did this. They show him being this hero where he kind of misses that old life. Ever since Black Widow, he wanted to suit up again. He finally did. And now in the United States, he wants to do it again. Even though in the comics, it's not like this, I do like his introduction to being a hero for America, which is kind of funny in this movie. This is also where we find out where the Thunderbolts name come from. It's not from anything that has to do with Thunderbolt Ross. It has nothing to do with where the Thunderbolts come from in the comics, but instead, it has to do with Yelena's old soccer team. And I think that's a lot of fun how they kind of played with that, because that's not the actual name of this team. The team ends up becoming the New Avengers, but they use a little joke this entire movie to play off of who the Thunderbolts are. Then we end up leading into what the next job is for Val, where they end up having to go against one another. Yelena's after Ghost. Ghost is after Taskmaster. Taskmaster is after John Walker, and John Walker is after Yelena, showing that Val was manipulating all of them so that she could tie up any loose ends that lead her to the Sentry project and the black ops she's been operating that the government should know about. Which also leads into Taskmaster's death, with Ghost being successful in killing her, which I think we all knew this was coming. The marketing did not do a very good job at telling us that Taskmaster wasn't going to die. She was in the first trailer, they had her in the elevator scene, but after that, they just stopped showing her entirely. Even with the Avengers Doomsday casting announcement, they had all the other characters other than Taskmaster. So at that point, we all knew she was going to die, and it was no secret. And it happens really early in the film, so it makes sense that that's the route they were going. I only thought that she was going to die after facing off against the Sentry, but I was definitely wrong about that. But that whole scene about the vault is what teased the Sentry project. Having Elena find the paperwork that pushed towards the Sentry project and what kind of inhumane things Val were doing, which kind of ties back into what the Sentry's origin is in the comics. Because Bob in this talks about how he was a meth addict, which again is another tie to who the Sentry is in the comics. Because in the comics, he was a drug addict who stumbled into an experimental super soldier formula called the Golden Sentry Serum that gave him immeasurable powers, like psionic abilities that gave him the ability to keep objects from crumbling, also psychic abilities to implant memories, which kind of ties into what happens with the Void in this movie, how the Void reaches deep into their traumatic memories to make them relive it, and also how he was able to stop bullets and send people flying. Plus, we have his superhuman abilities of speed, stamina, and vulnerability, and also molecular kinesis, biokinesis, materialization, resurrection, which we do kind of see that resurrection in this after Mel does the kill switch on the Sentry, killing him for a second, and then before the Void gets released, it's kind of that resurrection as he's resurrecting himself and coming back to life to, well, pretty much turn into the bad guy until he was able to be stopped. Now, in the comics as well, Reynolds was eventually pushed beyond his limits, which turned him into the Void, and the Void being a split personality that was created when he got his powers. And he also joined the New Avengers in the comics, which does tie back into the ending of the movie of it becoming the New Avengers. Now, in the comics, the only character here on the New Avengers team is the Sentry, but in that iteration, it also had Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, Luke Cage, Ronin, Iron Man, Captain America, and Wolverine. So obviously, we probably won't be getting the New Avengers with this lineup, but it is cool to kind of get the Sentry being there, and it also makes sense why it's called the New Avengers. Now, when it comes to the Void, his other personality from his broken psyche, the Void is a destructive and dark entity was bonded to Bob when he became the Sentry and acts as a counterforce and an embodiment of his negative aspect. He has all the powers of the Sentry as well as darkness manipulation and other powers, but the darkness manipulation is how he's able to control everything in this movie. How we see them get sent to this kind of other realm is because of this, which I thought was really cool. So they did change up the Sentry a bit, but honestly they kept a lot of his origins from the comics, and as a character who hasn't appeared a lot in comics in the last 10 years, it is really cool to see him show up once again. Now as we continue this, we do find out that Bob was kept in a stasis pod, and he was and the whole reason he was there is to hide it from Val, to show that her experiments weren't a success because of how broken this man was. They wanted to hide him away to make sure Val couldn't use this potential possible villain that they warned about during the entire film, starting with the first scientist, and then when they bring him back with Val, they realize that he has a broken psyche, and there's a reason why they kept him locked away. Now while this is all going on and Val tries to burn them all, we do have Val at a fundraiser event for the Battle of New York City for all the first responders. And we had a couple little Avengers Easter eggs, which were cool during this. We have Loki's scepter, we have Chitauri weapons, we have Avengers logos, and we have the banners with Avengers on them. So just kind of tying back to the first Avengers film, this is kind of a homage to that. With the new Avengers coming in, they're paying homage to the first Avengers movie. We even have Val during all of this referencing all the characters' past. We have Taskmaster and Budapest being destroyed, which we saw in Black Widow, Ghost, a thief, which we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We have Yelena being a Red Room assassin from Black Widow. Then we have U.S. Agent killing someone as he's Captain America, a disgraced soldier from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So it's just really cool to get the references to all their past stuff we saw in the previous movies. And while Val is trying to roast them in that room, we do have Walker trying to break open a panel, and he says, "On your left," just like how Captain America says to Sam in Winter Soldier, and then Sam saying to Captain America in Endgame. And after we get out, that's where we get the first sense of the Void's power as he's touching Yelena, and she sees a Red Room incident where she got one of the girls, Anya, her friend, killed. It was all a test, but it shows back to her Red Room past and showing the trauma she's been through ever since she was a young girl. Also giving us a taste of the Void's powers as he's able to manipulate her memories and see into her past. This is also where we get the joke about how Yelena says that all these characters here are just a bunch of ones that punch and kick, the meta reference to the real world after we first saw that a Thunderbolts lineup. How are this anything other than just a bunch of super soldiers? None of them really have powers, and we were all questioning this weird dynamic of how it was going to work out of just nothing else other than a bunch of soldiers. It was cool to see it. Like, it was cool to kind of get that reference because they're playing a joke on the audience who were roasting the shit out of this movie when it first got announced, and I like that they put that in there. Now, when we do end up talking about the characters' pasts in this movie, we do have Ghost talking about her traumatic past, where she's gone through, which is a reference to what we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp, where we saw that she got the ability to make herself intangible from the quantum experiment that went wrong, and how her family was killed, and she was taken in by Bill Foster and S.H.I.E.L.D. and used as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent for a while until S.H.I.E.L.D. was dismantled. She was slowly dying from the quantum energy, and the only way she's still around nowadays is because of Janet Van Dyne helping her recover her humanity and putting her back together by making her solid once again, having the quantum energy not affect her anymore. We also have the reference of Taskmaster being in Black Widow. After they got out of that vault, Ghost references how that Yelena knew her, which is a reference, of course, to Black Widow, how Taskmaster was going around trying to kill her and Natasha for the entire movie. And I feel like if Natasha was here in this moment, she would have a bigger reaction to Taskmaster getting killed, but Yelena didn't as much. So interesting to see how they put that in there and how it wasn't really a big effect. And I feel like this is mostly so that they can bring in the actual Taskmaster from the comics, Tony Masters, who is more of a charismatic, joking kind of character who has the ability to watch someone fight and be able to copy their fighting moves and pretty much take on anyone other than like Deadpool and Moon Knight because of their unpredictability. Then we have John Walker being talked about how he's disgraced Captain America because he killed the guy during Captain America Winter Soldier because of him killing the guy in Falcon and the Winter Soldier with the Captain America shield. Just all leading back into the ending from that series of him taking on the U.S. agent persona and becoming a different hero. We also see how he was dealing with that traumatic experience with when he touched Bob and seeing how he was sitting in his room with his kid while his kid was crying, just staring at the failure he was with the news article and how he was having this very bad home life and how he couldn't get over the mistakes he made. But once they go to escape, we have some fun moments, but we also get the moment of Bob sacrificing himself so that the others could escape, which then shows us his powers. We get the invulnerability, him being able to fly, and how he has these superhuman abilities that is just like the comics. While the characters on the run, Alexei comes in to save them and give them the warning that Val was trying to kill them the entire time. But of course, he's way too late because he literally drove all the way from DC to get to them. And it was just a fun moment of this father being an embarrassment to his daughter. And I like how they play that because he's just telling Yelena's embarrassing stories while she's around her so-called friends at the moment, and I like how they played it, especially when they have Val's task force come after them and they're trying to survive. They make all the jokes about how the windows are bulletproof, how they're trying to stop them, and then Bucky coming in to be the savior. He comes in to save them and then blows it up. This was honestly just an overall great scene of it just having funny moments of the characters being shocked when they're trying to go against the task force, and then also being amazed when Bucky saved them, and then also captures them at the same time, which then leads to even more fun moments about how the characters are trying to explain to Bucky what's going on with Bob and his powers, but he's not believing them until Mel calls him and warns him about it, and then he turns around to them, forcing them to be heroes, relating to them how he's made mistakes. He's had regrets he's made in the past for being the Winter Soldier. If they face their past trauma, they can overcome it and be better people, which is exactly what Bucky's journey has been. He was a Winter Soldier and then eventually learned to overcome it and try to be better and move forward and stand kind of in the proper way that Steve Rogers would have always wanted him to be. We also get to see a little bit of Valentina's past during this when she touches Bob, as she's manipulating him to try to become this hero, because her past shows that she was hidden from her father hid her because someone was after them, and she watched her father get killed in front of her, which kind of leads into the fact that she says there are bad guys and then there are worse guys, showing that she doesn't see this world as there are there are good guys and bad guys, because her father wasn't a good guy and the guy who killed him was a worse guy, kind of showing her past trauma and what's pushed her forward to try to have all this power, because she always wants to be at the top. She'd be that worst guy so that no one else can reign over her. When Bucky and the rest of them are going after Val, we do get them going to New York City, having them drive into Avengers Tower. And I love that the way they do this is they have no plan. Their plan is literally just to bust in, go to the top, and start beating up everyone. Which Val's just like, seriously, guys? I left the door open for you. Just like a really fun moment there. And the comedic moments in this movie also landed a lot. And I do like on their way there, we do a reference to both Alexei and Bucky being super soldiers. We got the Russian one and the Hydra one, where that's just a reference to how Bucky was created, with Hydra turning him into the Winter Soldier. And with this movie, we learned that Val was the one that bought the Avengers Tower and took it in as her own. So just cool to see what happened. Ever since Spider-Man Homecoming, we finally learned who bought Avengers Tower. When the Thunderbolts get to the top of the tower, we get to see the Sentry in his brand new suit, looking like the Sentry from the comics, and honestly, it looks absolutely sick. And of course, that leads into Valentina calling him Earth's Mightiest Hero, which is a reference to the Avengers being the Earth's Mightiest Heroes. So just a nice cool nod to who the characters are, but also giving us the moment of him literally being the mightiest hero and a god, as the Thunderbolts try to take him on and can't do absolutely anything against him. They're shooting him, doesn't work. They're stabbing him, it doesn't work. He's literally too powerful for all of them, and it just shows how strong this character is. And also explains why there was no way for these characters to beat him in this film, and how they had to get Bob to defeat the Void, which then leads to them just retreating because there's nothing they can do. Mel coming in to kill the Sentry to save Valentina, who's currently getting choked out, and I honestly thought Val was gonna die in this. Like, it definitely felt like she was gonna get killed by the Sentry when he turned evil, but instead they saved her and had the Void come out and take over New York City. Which, before all that, we do have Yelena calling out everyone for all the terrible shit they've done. She doesn't want to be part of this team, and she leaves, which then gives us an absolutely fantastic moment about Lexi showing Yelena that she used to be full of joy. She used to be a really happy child. That's all to push her on the hero journey, to make her realize that she can still redeem herself and be this hero, which leads the Thunderbolts to saving all the civilians around them. Each one of them gets their own little moment of being these heroes and working together, and having the city cheer for them as they do it. Even having Alexei get this really badass moment of him stepping in front of a falling concrete to save this little girl, just to give us probably the most traumatic moment of the little girl getting freaking shadow-eyed in front of Alexei. Like, that was dark. I was not expecting that. Like, even though the girl got saved in the end of the day, I was not expecting her to get wiped off the planet in front of Alexei. But that entire part was to show these characters they still have a chance to be better, to be the heroes that they're meant to be, and redeeming them in some way. So I just really like that little point in the film, and also shows us how powerful the Void is as he starts to overcome New York City in darkness. And you may ask, where are the other heroes? Where's Daredevil? Where's Spider-Man? Well, we could just assume they got sucked up into it and had to face their past traumas, with Peter Parker seeing Aunt May's death over and over again, and Daredevil seeing all the other trauma he's seen through the past. So that we could just assume everyone got sucked up into it, and of course, because the Thunderbolts were the only ones that had any idea what was going on, they could push past their trauma and face it. Which is where we have Yelena going in to face her trauma, seeing everything and realizing that she needs to push past it to get to Bob, finding him after seeing a bunch of traumatic experiences with the Red Room, and even seeing her own alcoholism, and finding a way to get to Bob to talk to him and get a way out and find the way out of there. Showing us that Bob's trauma and the way he's been trying to avoid everything is running away and hiding in a little corner. Because when he was a kid, he grew up never believing he could do anything right because of his mother, who was abused by his father. he stood up, but after doing that, his mom says he always makes things worse, which was what made him, as a kid growing up, think he could never do anything. He could never be better. And that's what his deep-rooted trauma was, thinking that he always had to be alone because no matter what he did to step in, he always made things worse. And I do love how Yelena was the one that talked him through it, making him realize that he can't push everything down. Going against what she said at the start of the film, that you just push all that past trauma away so you don't have to face it. Instead, you have to face it to overcome it. That's when we have the Thunderbolts coming in, and they all face their past trauma, which unfortunately we didn't get to see. But because Yelena was the main focus of this series, of this movie, it did make sense that we saw hers and not theirs. And the thing is, I love when Bucky came in because he's like, it's something I've faced before and I've already moved past it. So he was able to get past his past trauma because he was already done it. I love how they had his character as well in this movie. And the Thunderbolts coming in is kind of a way to symbolize that you don't have to do everything alone and that you could work together to make a better future and be better yourself. So when they do go to take on the Void and Bob has to do it on his own, they start to realize that Bob can't do it on his own because you can see the Void overcoming him, destroying him and turning him into this evil person. But with the Thunderbolts, they all push past their limits. They get out of the restraints that they're in and they go and hug Bob, leading into that ending we got where the Thunderbolts were able to defeat the Void by helping Bob overcome his past trauma and realize that he's not alone. Because the whole point of this entire movie was to show that to face your past trauma, to face your past mistakes, you can't do it alone and you have to do it with people you care about. So I love how they did that. And it led into them becoming the new Avengers like we talked about before, which was just a lot of fun to see how they got to that point in this movie. You know, it wasn't about punching the big bad and beating him. It was about facing your past trauma. So honestly, just a fantastic message for this movie overall. Plus, we had a fun mid-credit scene during this where it was Alexei in a grocery store. He's lost a little bit of weight and how he's pointing to his new Avengers Wheaties cereal and trying to show people he's famous because that's all he's wanted to be. He wanted to be this hero and he got to be it. So just really cool overall to see what they did with this movie and how they pushed these characters forward. Now, before we end this video, you know, when we talk about who the Thunderbolts are, they aren't like this in the comics whatsoever. Because in the comics, they start off as the Masters of Evil led by Baron Zemo, who deceived authorities by rebranding themselves as these heroes. However, later, the characters that weren't Zemo got their chance at redemption because of Hawkeye. Only one of them was a murderer, and the rest of them had a chance to actually be heroes. So it's cool to kind of see what the two differences are, because in the comics as well, there's a bunch of iterations where once during Civil War, they were hero hunters as they went against people who didn't follow with the Superhuman Registration Act while Norman Osborn was their director. And then during the Dark Reign event, Norman Osborn disbanded that team and created his own secret Thunderbolts with Ghost on the team, so it makes sense that Ghost was also part of this Thunderbolts team, as well as Yelena because she was part of that team as well. Then during the Hydra Cap event that happened during the comics, the Thunderbolts were created again, but with Bucky as their leader. Then during the Mayor Fisk era, he created his own Thunderbolts with Baron Zemo back on the team, but after that team disappeared, he made a new team to go against Null that had Taskmaster and Rhino on it. Then later down the road, after Luke Cage became mayor of New York City, he created a new team that had Hawkeye and America Chavez on it. So just really cool to see the different iterations of the Thunderbolts, but also showing that both Ghost and Taskmaster and Bucky have all been part of the different iterations of the Thunderbolts in the comics, so it makes sense that they were part of the team in this movie. But at the end of the day, I want to know, what did you think of this movie? Were there any other Easter eggs and references you noticed? How do you feel about the ending and post-credit scene? And do you have any theories for Avengers Doomsday? I really hope you guys enjoyed this movie. I know it's a lot to talk about, and we pretty much just recap the movie as well, but I feel like this is a very important movie to talk about because of its dealing with mental health, past trauma, and how to overcome it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button to stay up to date with all my Marvel breakdowns, DC, anime, and all that fun stuff, because I will be covering the TV shows and the movies for the cinematic universes, as well as doing some anime reactions like I do with Black Clover. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you later when it's time to break down another superhero project.